Welcome to Toastmasters. Welcome to an international organization which specializes in helping people to become better communicators and leaders. And this Toastmasters Unplugged is the first of a series of live interviews, live panels. And today I have the great fortune to be able to introduce to you four, one of them isn't here yet, four speech champions. Kyle Murta is the table topics champion of District 71. Kyle won this title in May of this year. James McGinty is the evaluation speech champion, and he also won that title at the District 71 conference in Portlaoise earlier this year. Paul Donald Encana is our international speech champion. That's a 5 to 7 minute speech. And just arriving now is John Marsh, the most humorous man in District 71. John, you're very welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me?
John won our humorous speech contest. And John, since you've arrived last, I'm going to ask you first a lovely question. When did you first start entering any sort of speech contest?
So this is the first contest I've done. So I did the club level. Is it club, area, division, district?
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I did all of those before, but this is the first time I've ever entered a competition, really.
Right. Ever in your whole life, and you emerge as the District International Speech Contest winner.
Yeah, beginner's luck, I reckon.
Well, how did you feel after you won that?
After I won the district one?
Yes, of course.
I felt exhausted. Actually, I felt really tired. I felt proud. I felt like I'd done well. And it's all a bit of a blur, isn't it? I felt, just in a haze. But yeah, I felt good, but shocked. All happened very quickly. Yeah.
Did you go and celebrate afterwards, by the way? And how did you celebrate?
Yeah, we had to leave quite quickly straight out because the humorous speech was right at the end, wasn't it? So we had to leave quite quickly. Then we had a quick zip around Dublin before getting on the plane and coming back home. I don't think I have celebrated. Although when I turned up to my next group meeting, I got a round of applause from everyone. That was a bit embarrassing. Yeah, I don't think I have. It's all happened. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have. Maybe I should buy myself a bottle of champagne or something.
Well, John, you're our humorous speech champion. I want now to go to the international speech champion, the person who probably thought, why is he introducing John as the international speech champion? Paul Donald. Paul, when did you first start entering speech contests?
Right. So I first entered back in March. No, it was March 2022, I believe. So I entered Toastmasters. It was March 2021, and then that following year, I entered my first speech contest, which was actually in the United States of America because I'm a dual member. I'm a member of a club in Dayton, Ohio, which is Dayton United Communicators, and I entered as their member, and I actually progressed all the way to district level, and I finished third in my first year, as a matter of fact. So, yes, that's when I first entered. Hey,
and tell me what happened to you after you got third? Were you down in the dumps, or were you resolute that next time you were going to be a winner?
To be honest, I didn't actually know what to expect because, like John said, that was my first time, and I was sort of hoping. I was just there to see what this Toastmasters is all about, really. And as I got to the third place, I was pretty happy because I realized how big of a stage that is. But then I set a goal for myself to come back and claim the international world title one day. And I'm still on that quest, but I feel like I'm getting closer every year.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Now let me go to the man in the multicolored shirt, James McGinty, all the way from Scotland. When did you first enter a speech contest, James?
Do you know, Paul, I've been sat here hoping you weren't going to ask me and you were just going to skip past that. I entered my first speech competition of any description in 2001, which was before I even joined Toastmasters. It was another organisation, but I first entered in 2001.
And what organisation was that, James?
The Association of Speakers Clubs, who were a breakaway from Toastmasters many years ago. A great organisation, but not as good as Toastmasters.
And you won our evaluation speech contest this year. Have you ever won a speech contest in your life?
Oh yes, oh yes. I am proud to say that I'm the only person in District 71 that has won all 4 competitions: humorous speech, international, evaluation, and table topics. So yeah, I'm a bit mad.
Wow, wow. Kyle Murtagh, also from Scotland, our off-the-cuff speaking champion, our impromptu speaking champion, our table topic speaking champion. Kyle, when did you start entering speech contests?
My first Toastmaster contest was in March 2018. I went in for the international and the evaluation, got beat in the international at club level, won the evaluation and got all the way up to district. And that's, I think, the first time we met, Paul, in Cork, Ireland, for that conference in May.
I've never forgotten how tall you were on stage, Kyle.
I like to think I've kept the height.
That's lovely. And tell me, have you, same question I asked James, have you won any other speech contests?
Yes, I've won 5 in the last 5 years. I've done 2 evaluations, twice the international and the table topics there. So James might be the only man for now with all 4, but next year I'm hoping to join him on that pedestal.
And Kyle, when you joined Toastmasters, had you any previous experience of public speaking to crowds of people while on stage?
A little bit. I was actually at the same club, the same organization that James talked about for a year before I joined Toastmasters. And in fact, that's where I met James, and he told me I should join Toastmasters. And he's kind of responsible for all of this, to be honest. So that's quite interesting. But I was there for a year, Paul, and you know, like most people, my first presentation, awful, dreadful. I was shaking my first table topic, but got through it. And the more I did, the more I began to enjoy it, fall in love with it, become fascinated with it. And that's why I'm still doing it to this day, because it's something I truly, truly have a passion for.
Well, you know, that description you've given of yourself floundering there on stage, it reminds me of the experience that people have when they first have a go at swimming. They almost certainly sink, get too much water in their mouth, and even have mild panics. So public speaking is just like swimming. James, outside those 2 organizations, the organization of speakers in Scotland and also Toastmasters International, what about when you were at school and when you were a young man? Did you do any public speaking?
No, I didn't. It wasn't something that really engaged me. I wasn't a great scholar. I wasn't a great attender of school. So I suppose I developed my my storytelling skills rather than public speaking skills to make up excuses for not actually going to school. And yet, in my early career, I mostly had manual type jobs, so no call for public speaking. So I didn't come into public speaking until quite late in life, shall we say. Let's leave it at that.
Look, telling stories is such a essential habit to have in order to be able to hold your own in any social group. My suspicion is that all four of you got into telling stories to your mates in a pub or on the football field. Would that be right, Paul? Did you get into telling stories at an early age?
To be honest with you, I was quite shy as a kid. That's sort of the reason why I wanted to get in Toastmasters in the first place, because when I was younger, I would be the guy at the back of the class who wouldn't want to speak to anybody. So I wasn't a great storyteller as per se, but I think I've always had this desire of getting better and wanting to improve that skill, because I thought all the cool kids in school, they all knew how to tell stories, right? And that what got them far, whether it's getting a new girlfriend or whether it's about joining a team. They all knew how to interact with people and tell other people's stories. And that's what I observed when I was younger. And then I sort of always wanted to be that guy, but I never really took a step up until probably I joined Toastmasters. That was my first serious step towards storytelling.
Well, since you mentioned bring into the conversation the idea of attracting other people to yourself, it's probably true that storytelling is the most ancient form of seduction. John Marsh, what do you think of that?
Storytelling is the most ancient form of seduction. Yeah, it probably is. What do you think about it? Oh, God, I don't know.
Okay, well, look, we have in Toastmasters a widely practiced method called table topics, and I've just thrown John Marsh.
I know. Table topics are my pet hate. Wolf, don't like them. In fact, yeah, this year one of my aims is to do it more, like table topics. That's why I found Kyle's win amazing. I find it quite hard. But yeah, storytelling, brilliant skill. And actually, I remember years ago when I went on holiday to Morocco with a few friends of mine, and there's that famous square in Marrakesh. And in the evening, there were these people, like men, and they were standing under an umbrella, and everyone was crowded around them. And I said to my friend once, "And what is that?" And they were just storytellers, and they would go to the square in the evening. They would stand there, they would tell a story, and people would just come and crowd around and listen to them. And I thought, wow, we've kind of lost that, haven't we? We're all just sitting at home on Netflix in the West or whatever. And yeah, that really brought it home, the power of telling stories. And, stories go through generations. Things aren't always written down. Sometimes we lose that. Yeah.
Well, John, you had to make a between 5 and 7 minute humorous speech in order to win your trophy.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Murtagh had a much easier job. He only had to speak for 1 to 2 minutes in order to win his trophy. Kyle, what on earth possessed you to talk about dinosaurs in your winning speech?
Well, for the semi-final, the topic was, of course, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? And I think if you want to stand out in table topics, you've got to go for the answer that the audience don't expect. And I think most people would expect people to say cats or dogs in that moment. So I thought, screw it, dinosaur. And then I just went on a little rampage about all of my favorite previous dinosaurs, what I would do if I was a dinosaur, the speeches I would tell in Toastmasters if I was a dinosaur. And I think that's what you've got to allow Table Topics to do. Bring out your crazy a little bit. Bring out the kid inside, if you like, Paul.
Well, membership of Toastmasters gives people a terrific opportunity to become better and at communicating outside Toastmasters. So tell me, Kyle, if you're at a dinner party and someone throws you a question, what's your favorite film, Kyle? How do you answer that with a kind of dinosaur type story?
I certainly try and make it an interesting story. I would probably say in that particular case, my favorite movie is Die Hard, because when I was about 8 years old, my gran used to secretly let me watch it when my mom didn't know. And so I would probably go on to talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, you always want to make every response interesting. We don't want to hear the usual response. I don't know what the usual movie is that people enjoy. Green Mile, something like this, right? I don't know. But yeah, you always want to try and make it engaging. And I think this is the beautiful thing about Table Topics. It transfers those skills you learn into your daily conversations, whether it be a one-to-one situation or a one-to-many at a dinner party, like you described.
Well, James, you work as a coach. You work helping people to be better communicators. And that means that you watch people communicating and you give them feedback in order to help them to grow, and you empower them that way. That's perhaps why you won the district evaluation speech contest, because you had to, along with many other people, watch somebody giving a speech and then give the speaker and everybody else in the room some feedback. Well, what's the hardest thing in a speech contest in order to be a good evaluator in public? What's the hardest thing, James?
The hardest thing is not what you say, but it's what you choose to leave out. You have to be very careful. You've got 3 minutes. And hopefully you're watching a good speaker and you can see lots of things to give feedback on. But it's really difficult to say, I'm not going to focus on this, I'm not going to focus on that. Because like Kyle said there, you need to look at the unexpected. You need to look at the thing that everybody else is saying, oh, your vocal variety could have been a little bit better. Your gestures could have been a little bit bigger. But you want to find something very different about each speaker, something that makes that speaker go, whoa, I never thought about that before. And if that speaker is thinking that, then hopefully the audience and therefore the judges are thinking the same thing. So it's very hard to avoid the mundane and focus on the specific but different. And I think that's the hardest thing to do.
Well, I must say, the first thing I noticed about you the first time I met you was the shirt you were wearing. And I thought, this man will be memorable on stage. He has an unfair advantage over everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's a deliberate plan. Excellent, excellent. Now, Paul, you won with a 5 to 7 minute speech, which included a basketball as a prop. Now, where did you get the idea for that particular speech? Was it 6 months before? Was it just dating for 5 years? Where did that idea come from?
So I think I started crafting my speech about, I think it was the end of December. And the idea came from my, I guess, personal experiences. Basketball, like I mentioned in my speech, I used to play professionally in Russia. It played such a big part in my life that I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to actually pay tribute to my career in a sense and highlight the importance of basketball and how it shaped me as an individual. And yeah, I think personal stories are the ones that you relate with the most are probably the best ones to give. So every speech that I give, pretty much every single speech, comes from my own personal experience, and that's why I'm so passionate when I deliver that message on stage, because I'm living through that experience as I'm delivering it. So, yeah.
And you were a basketball player in Russia.
Correct.
Tell me, is it true that you had once had a trial for the Russian basketball team?
I didn't have a trial for the national team. I wasn't that good, but I did play for a semi-pro team. And it was a great experience because you learn a lot from a discipline perspective, hard work, commitment, dedication, all those things that I took into actually my competition, which helped me in my preparation and my attitude towards this competition as well. So, yeah.
And you didn't just make a speech about basketball. You didn't just stand there as tall as any basketball player, but you had a message that you wanted to use the basketball story to get it across. You wanted to lift up an audience. What was the message you were hoping to get across when you were planning the speech?
Yes, I think for me, I guess the main message there was about self-acceptance and using a platform that you have in your life, whether it's basketball, whether it's making YouTube videos, or whether it's being a hairdresser or whatever that is. Just use that to build yourself up and remind yourself that regardless of your differences, you still have something worth giving to this world. And that was really my message, to say that, look, that's who I was in the past, a shy kid that used to get bullied. And then when I came across the game of basketball, in particular, when I saw that poster of Michael Jordan, I got inspired by that message. And I saw somebody who was unapologetic about their being. So I said to myself, you know what, I can be like that person. And that will kind of spark my, I guess, dream of becoming a professional player. And then I used basketball to transform myself into a new person. So that was kind of my message throughout the whole, I suppose, speech.
And what an uplifting message that was.
Thank you.
Especially for younger people who were dealing with or coping with being nervous, not feeling strong enough, not feeling good enough. And your speech spoke out to people like that, didn't it?
Yeah, I felt like it did. And yeah, otherwise I would have not won, I think. So it definitely worked, hey?
It certainly did. John Marsh, I'd like to give you the same question, really. When did you start to plan your humorous speech? And what were you hoping to achieve by giving the humorous speech?
So I started to plan my humorous speech. It must have been quite a while ago now. I can't remember the exact timeline, but it was definitely a speech that I did at the club, like quite a while back, and then I dragged it out for the humorous speech competition. And what did I hope to achieve? I'm not sure, actually. It was just came from it was a true story. It came from an anecdote from my life. And yeah, so I went to this job interview and I wore too much aftershave, and it was kind of inspired by a conversation I had with a friend of mine, where a female friend of mine, that said, she said, if I don't walk out the house, if I literally am not stinking of it, I'm not choking on it, I feel like I don't have enough on. I was like, yeah, totally. I thought it was a really good thing, like makes me kind of, masculine and strong, and here I am. And then I didn't get the job, which I was quite surprised about, bizarrely. And then years later, I read this coaching book, and it had this section about smells. And it went into this whole thing. It said, you walk into that room and you stink of aftershave, and you don't know what you're doing. You could remind someone of some dodgy ex-boyfriend they had, or that father-in-law they couldn't stand, or some horrible boss they had. And I was like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong for all these years. I actually thought it was a really good thing to walk in stinking in aftershave, and it wasn't. And So I think it's always good in a speech if, you know, obviously mine was about something quite mundane, just going for a job interview and all going a bit pear-shaped. But if you can throw in something where actually people learn, you know, who knew? I don't know, like aftershave, the olfactory system, our sense of smell is very instinctive. It's quite good to teach people something new, a bit like what James and what Carl was saying earlier on, something a bit unexpected. And also, I think the more I practiced it, the more I quite liked experimenting with movement. I quite like movement. I think movement is good because for me, a bit like what Paul was saying earlier on with, you know, feeling a bit nervous. Obviously, he doesn't feel as nervous as he used to when he was younger. But if you can get on the stage and start moving, I feel like it helps me, you know, the kind of the nerves move with me and they almost kind of move up and move out. And I like that. And also with James, with his humorous speech, any kind of movement is funny. I mean, the T-shirt moment with James's speech, I can still, unfortunately, see it now. no offense, James.
Look, talking about nerves.
Never unsee that one. But yeah, so leave something with a memorable thing. I think that's why I wanted to do the whole twirl thing, because people will just remember it. Like, you know, Paul and the basketball, James and the shirt, Carl and the dinosaur.
What I'd also say, John, is what really worked with yours was the full commitment as well. You know, like you were on, I remember there was a scene on the train and you were like, you were worried that you were losing it, you know, and
yeah.
it was full commitment to that feeling. Yeah. And I think that really brought the audience into what you were saying as well, so well.
Well, obviously, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention this man's name now, but as the more I did it, I kind of started feeding into this Woody Allen paranoid. It was almost a touch of OCD that we've probably all got. I mean, I've got a little, possibly somewhat to quite a lot, depending on the day. And it was just how something quite innocuous can build and build and build until it gets a bit out of control.
Well, look, let's just focus on nerves for a minute, because I want to ask the person here who has always struck me as never, ever been nervous, ever in his entire life. Kyle Murta, were you ever nervous? And can you give the listeners, the viewers, some tips on how they can overcome their nerves based on your experience?
Well, I mean, I certainly have the butterflies, the sweaty palms. I need to go to the bathroom more than usual. I have all of those things, but I don't necessarily see it anymore as me being nervous, Paul. I just purely view it as me being ready to go. And I think when you reframe it like that, when you realize, oh, the palms are sweating, the stomach feels like a washing machine. Oh, I need the bathroom. This is all good. This means I'm primed and ready to do what I need to do on stage. It just changes everything. And because saying that you're nervous, I've always had a problem with this. People say, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm worried. I think that's a very debilitating negative state of mind to go into a presentation with. I think it's a lot more positive if you can trick yourself and say, I'm excited or I'm ready, or just something a little bit more empowering for yourself, because then you bring that energy onto the stage with you. So I wouldn't say I feel different things. I just view it differently, Paul, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes huge sense. It's about you reframing the situation. Absolutely.
Sorry, can I just say, I think that's a great piece of advice. I remember a few years ago, I think I literally saw it on a Twitter feed or something, and somebody was saying, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And I think that's just reframing it really helps, because it's all the same symptoms of sweaty palms, of butterflies. But yeah, you are excited, you're ready to go, enjoy it.
Yeah,
absolutely. A lot of people join Toastmasters while they say to themselves, oh, I don't like this. Oh, I hope they don't ask me a topic. They're really struggling with that. James, what advice would you give to somebody who wasn't doing what Kyle suggested and was saying to themselves, oh, look, I feel terribly nervous. I'm not sure I'm going to do it. I suppose I have to. What's your advice? Oh, you have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute.
I was having a coughing fit earlier and I had to mute myself so that I didn't damage everybody's ears. Yeah. For me, it's mindful breathing that I advise people to do. And I don't do any of the classical stuff that people talk about that some people consider being a bit woo-woo, and a bit, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe. I just don't do that. It's simply taking a really deep breath through your nose and following the course of that breath up through your nose, down your windpipe, and feel it spread out into your lungs. And about 3 or 4 of those breaths, what it does, one, it really energizes you because it sort of cleanses your system a little bit. But the other thing, and the most important thing, is while you're taking that mindful breath and you're following and tracking it, you're not thinking about anything else. And all of a sudden, because you're no longer focused on this message, as Kyle was saying, if you're focused on, I'm nervous, I don't want to do this, you'll become nervous and you won't want to do it, and it will multiply. But if you do this mindful breath and really track it, really feel it expand into your lungs, that helps, but it's taking your mind off the fact that you think you're nervous. So it's Kyle said it, reframing it, which is what I do, but also you're redirecting your thoughts away from the nerves that you're having.
Super. Now, Paul, you had to get through a semi-final and get to the final. Well, first of all, which of the two were you most nervous about?
None.
Now look here. So tell me, how have you achieved mastery of your nerves?
I wouldn't say, well, you can call it mastery if you want to, but I would just say I sort of reframe my mind in a way what Kyle said, but I always say I'm excited about me getting on stage, but more so I start thinking, what would happen if I don't get on stage? That terrifies me more, because I'm thinking, if I'm that person who is nervous every time to get on stage, I don't want to be that person for the rest of my life. That the whole idea of me being that person terrifies me, because I used to be that guy. So for me, actually, the idea of me not getting on stage terrifies me more than the idea of me being on stage, if that makes sense. And that's how I reframe it, because every time I get an opportunity, I'm thinking to myself, wow, before, when I was in school, nobody wanted to listen to me, because every time I would get on stage, I would just get stuck on words. But now I have an opportunity to present to 300 plus people, and they're all there to listen to me for 5 to 7 minutes. This is perfect. This is my chance to actually, go again and again and again. So that's how I view it anyways.
Well, look, guys, there are lots of skills involved in winning a speech contest. And you get in Toastmasters lots of opportunities to practice your skills. Now, I want to ask you to give me, or give us, 2 skills that you've picked up, both as a club member in Toastmasters and as particularly a speech contestant. So 2 of the skills that you've picked up, John, what would your 2 be? And I'm going to go around the room with the same question.
2 skills. I think for my club, I'm very lucky because there's a lot of really good, experienced speakers. So definitely from Peter, who's been doing Toastmasters for a long time, I would say, don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself, and gestures and movement.
Okay. Lovely. Don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. Shakespeare would have said the same thing, I think. And use gestures. Kyle, 2 skills you've acquired in your experience over the years.
I would definitely say storytelling. I would never used to be a person who liked to tell a story. I was more get to the point. But then the more I got into the world of speaking, I realized, okay, there's a lot of power in having a story which promotes your point. It makes it more memorable and so forth. So I've had to learn that through the contest and through speaking at Toastmasters. And then the second thing I would say is I've learned how to enjoy the pressure, if you like, of contests. I love there's one part of the contest I don't like, but every moment of the lead up the doing, then the after. I love all of that, except that moment where the person's reading out the names, because then I feel powerless. But everything else, I feel fantastic and I really enjoy it. And I don't think I would have, say, when I began this journey back in 2018, for instance. So that is something which I've really taken a lot from.
Hey, when you talk about the person reading out the names, are you talking about the announcement of the results?
Yes. It is the worst part of a contest, because you got the 3, 2, 1, right? Third place, you're praying, not me. And then you hear third place and you're thinking, oh my God, they got third place. What does that mean for second and first? And then it's the second place, same thing. And then first place, and then you're like praying, me. And then you don't get read out. And then you're like, what the, so it can be a wild emotional experience in those 10 or 30 seconds when the names are getting read out.
Well, James, look, you've lost more speech contests than you've won. I think that'd be fair to say over the years. You must have lost more than you've won. What have you learned from not winning speech contests?
Under general circumstances, I would say it's about being magnanimous in defeat. It is so important that you recognize that either the person was so much better than you. And when I was in the humorous speech final, along with John, I thought I might have scraped a third test because I recognized that John's speech was so much better than mine. And you have to be able to recognize that. I have experienced what Kyle talked about there, where there was a speech contest where they did the 3, 2, 1, and I was pretty confident of winning. And I heard number 3 and I went, that's fair. I heard number 2, I thought, that's fair. And they were about to read out number 1, and people turned to look at me, waiting to see me get up to take the prize. 2 people had cameras pointing at me, and they read out somebody else's name. And I swear my face told a story it shouldn't have told that day, because I was furious. But I swallowed it back, and the first thing I did was get up and congratulated the winner. You have to learn not to walk away with any sour grapes. Boy, did my wife hear it from me in the car all the way back. A solid hour and a half I whinged about that result. But I've seen it go the other way. When they read out 3, then 2, and I thought, no, I didn't make the first 3. Because I knew I wasn't as good as a name that should have been read out. And then they read out my name, and I thought, happy days. It swings and roundabouts. We get bad results. Judges are almost human. And, we just have to accept the results and be magnanimous in victory. That's the biggest learning for me. The second point of learning for me is that the first cut doesn't have to be perfect, that, you don't have to strive for perfection right away, and you build and build and build towards giving a great speech.
Lovely. And Paul, when you were preparing in Toastmasters, whether in Toastmasters on the other side of the world or Toastmasters in the UK, and what have you learned? What's the 2 most valuable things you've learned?
I would probably say 2 most valuable. Okay, so I would say I definitely learned quite a lot about myself. I would say when I say myself, I mean, I didn't think I was going to be that passionate about public speaking years ago, but I've really put a lot of time and preparation into the speech. And I guess what I learned about myself is how passionate and how much sort of love I have for this particular niche. And maybe that's something that I want to pursue further. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I've learned probably actually learned that whilst I was at the competition is the importance of preparation from a mental standpoint of view. And I sort of mentioned that when I was playing basketball, I learned a lot of things around discipline. And this time around, so I've never sort of gotten to this stage in person. So I didn't necessarily know how to approach that when I got to a district level. But I applied the same principles from basketball. And one thing I've learned is that that's something that I did. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but I was the last speaker. And to be honest, even in the semi-final, I was the fourth speaker, I think. And I would basically just leave the room. And then I only get there when it's my turn. And the reason being is because I truly believe that when you're sat in there, that's something that I've learned, so to speak. When you're sat there and you're listening to other speakers, every single speaker brings their own level of energy. And every single speaker brings their own story, right? And as human beings, we tend to obviously tune into other people's story. And when it's your time to deliver your story, let's say if somebody before me delivered a humorous speech, humorous-ish, but my story is a bit more emotional, like a deeper story, right? And I'm sat there and I'm listening to somebody who is delivering a humorous speech. Surely it would take me more than 1 minute to recalibrate and get ready for my speech. And that's one thing that I've learned is that when it's your turn to speak, make sure that you are prepared from an emotional standpoint of view and from a mental standpoint of view. You're in that sort of aura to be able to get on stage and then just deliver. So it doesn't take you as much time to warm up and get into your state of speech, because by the time you get into your state of speech or your state of emotion, you will probably be halfway through, and you don't want that to happen. That's something that I've learned.
I love that, and I love the variety of advice you've all given. I have one very quick question for you, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience because we've had some powerful questions in the chat. After your experience as contestants, if you could change one thing about the speech contests, any aspect at all about our speech contests in Toastmasters, what would you change? John Marsh, what would you change, if anything?
There's been a lot of debate. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but there's been a lot of debate in my club about the international speech contest and the way, I didn't quite understand this, but the way you get to the final and then it goes quite secretive and there's a load of Toastmasters sitting in a room and they choose that one. And a lot of people are saying, well, that stage should be more transparent. So I think maybe I'd look into that, possibly changing that.
Okay, that's how the regional, 2 people from each region qualify to go forward to the World Semi-Finals, which will be in Anaheim this summer in August. Kyle, something you would change?
I love John's point there, because I've experienced that both ways. Here's something I think is missing. We give feedback in every single aspect of a Toastmasters meeting. We give feedback to the general evaluator. Sometimes I've seen that. So every single person in a meeting gets feedback. The only time we never give anyone any feedback is when they're competing. The judges never suggest to the contestants, okay, this is why you didn't place, or this is what you could do better next time. We don't get any form of feedback. And as a contestant, you've got to kind of figure it out yourself why things didn't work out or why they did work out. And I really think there's an opportunity to provide some form of feedback without it causing, debates or people having fights and arguments. Just a way we can deliver feedback to contestants to give them the best chance of developing as speakers. Because ultimately, that's why we're in Toastmasters, to improve as speakers. And I think that is the one thing which is potentially missing.
Right. Food for thought there. James, what about you? Something you'd like to change?
Strangely, I suspect that Toastmasters used to give feedback to contestants because the Association of Speakers Clubs broke away from Toastmasters, and they give feedback to contestants. So I think that's a holdover from an older time in Toastmasters, so we may have dropped it. This is controversial, and I know it's controversial. I would love the judging to be public. This filling out those slips and putting them away. I have been an area governor, that's how far back I go, but equivalent of area director, assistant division director. I have been chief judge at so many contests. I'm appalled at some of the judging standards that we have. And some of them, it's very, very clear that people are voting for their own club member, marking them first, putting the person who would be first last so that they don't get too many points. And I know it doesn't happen. I'm not suggesting that it happens at every contest, but I think that if we had some way of having a decent pool of judges that we could call on, that who knew what they were doing, who could stand up in public and be counted for what they do, I think we would see a far better quality of judging and consequently a far better quality of contestants, because I know contestants who've competed and have said, I'm not competing anymore. I felt that judgment was awful and it's put people off. And I know 2 people that have left Toastmasters because they got an unfair contest decision at an area contest. So public judging, but I know it's controversial.
Well, of course, it reminds me of Strictly Come Dancing, where the judges are there. Well, we leave that. I can see you, James, in the role of whatever you call the Italian man, that wonderful Bruno Corleone.
Bruno Corleone, I'll give it 5.
Paul, what would you change, please?
I would probably agree with all 3 points. That was something that I was going to mention myself. But I guess just to add on top, I would probably say the regional stage. I would prefer it to be in person, because I think we've gone that far not to be doing it online. Since we've sort of been doing every single stage in person, we might as well just do the regional stage in person as well. It just makes sense. I don't get that part in, like, after we've done the district and then you do that one online and then whatever is next you do in person. Yeah, it doesn't make sense person.
I've got some wonderful questions for you from the audience. And let me start off with a question from Isabel. Isabel asks, do you have some tips to share for the ones who are preparing for their first speech contest? Now, let me see, who would be a good person to ask that? John Marsh, tips for somebody preparing for their first speech contest.
I would say, I don't know if this is right or not, but I would say keep it simple. Don't try and cram too much in. And like Kyle was saying before, just practice. Practice in front of your club, practice in front of different people. Yeah, get a lot of feedback. Yeah. And I think sometimes when you do a speech, it's a bit tempting. Oh, I want to say this and I want to say that. I want to put that in. And especially with something like the humorous speech, you need to, hopefully people are going to laugh. Well, actually, even with any speech, there'll be some reaction, or you don't want to cram so much in. I think it's quite good to be able to stop, react to the audience, maybe do a little bit of improvisation, because if you practice it enough, you can have room for that. Don't cram too much in. Practice. Get feedback from different types of people.
Great. So there are 3 things there. Wonderful. Don't cram too much in. Get feedback from lots of people. And one in the middle, I've forgotten. What was the one?
Practice.
Oh, yes, practice, of course. Yeah, well, look, let's look at a great question for Folas Ami. What tips do you have for a new Toastmaster who's aiming to become a champion speaker? I'm going to give that to James to start with.
Don't give up. Really, really, really don't give up. I have been a serial contester in Toastmasters since I joined in 2006. I was never good at the international speech contest. It didn't gel with me. It just didn't sit there with me at all. But I worked on it, I worked on it, I worked on it. And in, I think it was 2018, I got to my first district final in Manchester. And I failed spectacularly. And I mean spectacularly. Anyone who was there that day will remember it. I broke down in tears on the stage and couldn't remember what I had to say. And I had to walk off the stage and not finish my speech. But that didn't put me off. And it's about just it. I know for a fact that Kyle will tell you the same. It takes over your life when you want to win. It's not the be all and end all. You've got your job to get on with, you've got relationships to go off, but your spare time gets pretty much eaten up. If you really want to be a winner, you have to have a winning mindset, and you have to brush off all the failures, and you have to look at it. You need to find a mentor. You need to find someone you trust to give you feedback, and you need to be prepared to take that feedback and change. And in 2022, I somehow got to the final. My speech was not good enough. And I went and I spoke to Kyle. And I said, what do you think? And Kyle said, you need to change that speech. You will not win the final with that speech. And I wanted him to say that, but I knew he would be honest enough. I could have asked a dozen people and they would have said, yeah, go ahead, you'll be fine. But I knew Kyle would tell me the truth. And he said, brush off Mr. Wonderful. And I went and I had a speech called Mr. Wonderful that I'd given before. Nobody saw me for the next week while I practiced that speech and changed it and honed it and won with it. So perseverance, absolute perseverance is the solution there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Never give up. Wonderful. Kyle, what about your view? If you want to become a champion, one or two things. Yeah.
I think it's also a good idea to look at previous champions as well. And they are all on YouTube. If you want to look at any of the previous champions of the World Championship, of table topics, of evaluation, of anything, humorous speech, they are all on there. And there's tremendous amounts you can learn from watching their speeches and seeing their structure, seeing how they put a story together, how they react with the audience. And then you can apply some of those lessons to your own presentation. It's not about copying them, but it's just about getting a little bit of inspiration from how they're going about it, because success leaves clues. And there is a formula in Toastmasters speeches. And once you find that formula, it makes everything else a lot easier.
Lovely. One of the things I love here is that we have such a great cross-section. We have people here who have, well, John, very first speech contest. Paul, a few more speech contests. Kyle, yourself, you were very young in Cork in 2018. James, the grandfather of all contestants here. What could you not have done if you hadn't joined Toastmasters? There's a big one for you now. Leave not just the speech contests, but your life outside Toastmasters, your life inside. What if you hadn't joined Toastmasters? What would you not have been able to do? Put your hand up if you're ready to answer. Okay, you mustn't do that in Toastmasters. Paul, I'm going to go to you first. What could you not have done?
Oh, wow. Right. I can probably give you a little story. So I'll take you back to 2022. It was must have been in Toastmasters for about a year now. So I was in Manchester, in the city centre of Manchester. So bear in mind that's August, sunshine, which you rarely get in Manchester. So I'm wearing this Bahamas t-shirt. I've got my flat cap on. I've got my denim jeans. So I'm just cycling through the city centre, minding my own business. And as I'm passing by the train station, Manchester Piccadilly, all of a sudden I see this beautiful lady coming out. Now, she's walking the opposite direction as she comes out of the train station, and I'm cycling that way. Well, I've been in Toastmasters for a year at that point, and I said to myself, you know what? Well, the first thing I did was, as a matter of fact, I pulled my phone out and I said, "Hey, Siri," I hope my Siri's not going to go off now. And I said, "Can you please come up with a good chat-up line?" And then Siri came up with a chat-up line. The chat-up line was, as a matter of fact, it was a bit of a weird one, but Siri said, "Go up to that person and say to her, excuse me, are you from Tennessee? Because you're the only 10 I see." And I said to myself, okay, this is a little bit, I'm not sure about that one. But then I said to myself, you know what? Exactly, John, that's it. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I've been in Toastmasters for about a year. I can actually treat this as a table topic opportunity. And what I did was I eventually got enough courage to tap her on the shoulder. And I said, "Hi, I just went off the cuff. I didn't prepare anything. I just stopped her on the shoulder and I said, "Hey, my name is Paul. I just thought I would stop you because you look beautiful, XYZ." And we ended up going on a date. She decided to friend zone me afterwards. Hey, that happens to men. Hey, but outside of that, I mean, I would just say if it wasn't for Toastmasters, hey, I would have never had courage to be able to do those things. And I think that's something that I'm starting to take away from Toastmasters, is that it's not just applicable. It's not only applicable to job or business. It's also applicable to everyday life situation, whether you're going on a date or whether you are, I don't know, trying to join a team or when you're trying to make a new friend. So yeah, I would say if it wasn't for Toastmasters, I would have not had the courage to be able to do those things.
Lovely. Thank you. Now we're going to do a 30-second table topics.
Oh, okay.
30-second table topics. John Marsh, what would you not have been able to do if you hadn't joined Toastmasters? 30 seconds.
Well, obviously, from listening to Paul there, I mean, join Toastmasters, you're going to pull more. I have to say, that hasn't really happened to me since I joined Toastmasters, but it's good to know it's a possibility. And apart from that, I presented recently. I don't get that nervous about public speaking, but I don't like it at work. I get a little bit like, oh. And at work, they discovered that I won this competition. I kept it quite quiet. I've got a new boss. She's great. And she said, "Right, next team meeting, the floor is yours. You're going to tell us about public speaking tips." So I prepared something. I went along, I presented, and I don't think I would have done that before at work, because at work, I kind of shy away from it, even though I don't get nervous, but I'm not a very corporate person. But yeah, you can pull more, you get a better job, you earn more money. Boom.
Thank you very much, John. The red light has just come on. That's okay. Kyle, 30 seconds, please. What would you not have been able to do if you hadn't joined Toastmasters?
Imagine it's New Year's Eve. You're at a hotel with your entire family, celebrating with 100 other strangers. There's a Kaylee band and it's going phenomenal. Then the lead singer hands you the microphone and says, "Do you want to sing Mr. Brightside by The Killers?" Now, I don't know the words. I can't sing. I can't really do anything related to music, but I do it because I went to Toastmasters, because I've learned to say yes to stage time.
Oh, God. James, you've got 30 seconds.
I have become an expert at blagging interviews. I do a lot of training work, and I have to meet with clients, and very often they will grill me quite extensively, and I can't possibly know everything that they're asking me, but I can go away having them think I know everything about what they were asking me, because those table topics have taught me that I can answer any question in a fairly convincing manner.
Well, there you are.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, that's the secret of Toastmasters that
That's
we never
our
give
live-
never give away, James.
That's our live stream. This is the very first one that District 71 has ever done. It's a bit like opening up what Toastmasters is like to the wider world. And I want to pay huge, huge thanks to Kyle Murta, James McGinty, John Marsh, and Paul Donald and Kana. Thank you all very, very much.